Okay, everybody, I think I've got it. I just love showing vacation home movies. When I first asked if I could tag along on the cross-cultural camps, I really wasn't sure what to expect. Here I was, giving up 2 weeks of my vacation to go romping amongst the mosquitoes. I had to be just a little bit crazy. I soon found out these weren't to be just any old camping trips. 2 excursions had been arranged. One in the western part of the Northwest Territories, and one in the eastern Arctic. The objective was to bring together students of different backgrounds to learn all about the environment and the life it supports, from 2 very different points of view. Native elders and guides from the area were there to teach some of the traditional skills handed down to them from their parents and grandparents. Specialists from various environmental agencies attended to give a scientific perspective on the land. It was the ideal way to show how the traditional way of living off the land complements the scientific methods of knowing the environment. Obviously, the scientific knowledge would not have evolved if not for the experience of our forefathers. The unique part of the camping experience was the combination of students from very different backgrounds. Aboriginal and non-Aboriginal young people both had come to the camps to learn new skills and information about the world they live in. Moise Rabaska is a Dene guide that attended one camp who also turned out to be a wonderful teacher.
The basic on the traditional way is to survive on this land, on this north, and that's mainly been taught through our fathers, their fathers, and the land which we still have to hang on to that. It's very important to us to carry that out to the young peoples.
Candace Savage, who was...
Michael Sharp directed the 1991 Rae-Edzo camp.
And an important part of the mandate of the Science Institute right from the beginning was to try and get more recognition for Native traditional knowledge and try and incorporate it more in the daily lives of people in the north so they could see the value of it.
The first camp was at Rae-Edzo on the Great Slave Lake, not far from Yellowknife. The island our camp was on was so small it didn't even have a name. We had a great campsite, and it seems the mosquitoes thought so too. The teachers were waiting for us when we arrived. Somehow, they just didn't look like teachers. They looked so friendly. There were Dene elders, guides, biologists, geologists, and fish experts. Rosa Mantla is a teacher from Rae-Edzo. She came to the camp primarily to act as an interpreter for the elders.
John will be teaching traditional ways. I help the elders run their program in teaching their traditions and cultural things that they know how to teach the children.
Rosa explained that we were to be watching the elders and the scientists during different workshops every day. Elders would always be available to answer any questions or help us try one of the skills. I decided to check out the traditional drum making first. Johnny Rabaska has been a skilled drum maker in Rae-Edzo for a long time. People come to him to get perfect drum frames. With Rosa as an interpreter, we were told how to find the right kind of wood and shape it around the frame mold, like this one. Drum frames must be made from wood that is pliable enough to shape, yet strong enough not to break. Johnny looks for trees that are smooth and have less bark than others. When he has carved out a strip of wood, it is soaked in water to make it easier to bend. This mold is an old bicycle rim just the right size. Caribou hide is used to cover the drum and held there with sinew from the caribou. Sometimes tan hides will be tanned before a suitable drum cover is found.
I've been working on this kind of drum. When I hear the drum beat, it makes me feel good. And us Denny people, when we hear the drum all over the place, even a customer like you, and even my wife, people feel that there's a drum beat. And the beat of the drum makes you feel good.
A nice accompaniment to the drum-making workshop was the arrival of the Rae-Edzo Dene youth drummers. The drummers came to our camp to show us how they perform the traditional songs and what the drums mean. One of our workshops was with Steve Matthews, a biologist with the Territorial Department of Renewable Resources. If it's got wings and flies, chances are Steve can give you the information. Steve showed us how to identify ducks not only by their colorings, size, and shape, but also by the environment they live in. Besides looking at the duck at camp, Steve took us on a birdwatching expedition. This turned out to be the best part. We were promised a look at a bald eagle nest, but we discovered something even better before we could get to that. Nestled in the soft grass along the shore were Arctic tern, duck, and gull nests. The terns were quite alarmed that we were there and scolded us from a distance. The nests contained from as few as 2 eggs up to as many as 10. Many of the eggs were in the process of hatching. This one is definitely hatched.
There's several of them in here, see? Yeah. See the little babies?
Poking out his beak, look, you can see it.
This is an important moment.
Yeah, he's hatching.
Yeah, the sun's going to keep these eggs warm. These are duck eggs. I didn't actually see the duck go.
If it had been a cool day, we wouldn't have been able to get this close. Otherwise, when the parents fled, the eggs would have cooled down too much and might not have survived, or worse, become food for the larger birds. As we headed off towards another island, Steve told us how we can identify the existence of a large bird nest by looking at the base of a tree. Surrounding the ground of a nest tree will be fish bones, eggshells, and feathers. These signs usually mean there is a nest belonging to an eagle, osprey, or other large bird. It wasn't long before we found one, and through our binoculars we could see an eagle.
Well, there's actually a fellow that radio tracks these things, and he flies in a Cessna from Montana.
When we returned to the camp, Melanie Whaleloon and Harry Mantla were in the process of preparing a duck. After the majority of the feathers are plucked, the duck is turned in the fire to burn off any excess feathers. Melanie cleaned them and cut them up for their boiling pot. Often they will roast a duck over the fire. Whichever way it's done, it's very delicious. Another day was spent learning how to tan hides. It takes an incredible amount of work and experience to get the hide just right. The hide must first be washed with soap and water. A commercial solution, or caribou brains, is applied to soften and remove the hair. That process takes about 3 days. It is then rinsed again and stretched out in the sun to dry. With the hide thoroughly dry, it is laid across a stick taken from a birch tree. It is very important to choose a stick free of any bumps or bark lumps.
There's a bark here that makes a lump, or there's a roughness there that can damage the hide.
Both sides of the hide have to be scraped with a special tool.
The scraper here this one's made of a caribou leg, the hind leg. They have to split it in half, and then they take the mineral out. Then they sharpen this side of the blade. They use that part to scrape the hide.
Of course, we all got a turn, and the hide was coming along very nicely.
Going to stand up there.
Harry and some of the others were busy working on beaver pelts outside. Harry had trapped the beavers last fall and kept them frozen until now. We stretched the pelts out on a piece of plywood and nailed them down. After washing the pelts with soap and water, we scraped them clean. Rosa sewed the holes left by the beaver's legs so the pelts would dry in one piece. Soon, the pelts were ready to sit in the sun for the day to dry. This is what they looked like at the end of the day. Our next session was to learn the art of net fishing. Here we are being taken out in the boats with Roger Fraser and Lorne Penny, 2 fisheries officers from Hay River. The net they are using is called a gill net. It is stretched out and weighted so it doesn't move or tilt in the water. We are planning to come back and check our nets in the afternoon. Hopefully we'll have a nice supply of whitefish that thrives in the Great Slave Lake. Meanwhile, we were shown how to use a minnow net. This net is waded into the water and pulled back up to capture minnows. While we were waiting to return to check our gill net, we examined several types of mature fish that were previously caught. Besides identifying the different parts of a fish, Lorne and Roger told us how to tell the age by checking its length, weight, and by taking a scale sample. Scales have rings on them just like trees. And when examined under a microscope, the rings tell the age. The age can also be told by the ovalites, or small ear bone of the fish, which also has rings. The fish conservationists collect samples from different fish to be examined later in their lab. The samples let them determine the population of fish and the different species. Finally, we set out to check our gill net. Not a bad catch. 16 fish. I'll take a net over a worm any day. The fish we caught turned into a lesson on how to fillet and prepare them for smoking or drying. Marie Rabiska, or Ma as we all called her, is a Dene elder and an expert at preparing the fish. She left the end tail section intact so they could be hung to dry or smoke. A smoked fish can take days to cure properly, and the fire must be kept going at all times. The Canadian Shield dominates the landscape in the Yellowknife region. This is geologist heaven. The rock structure on our island made it the perfect location for an afternoon with Todd Burlingame, a geologist with the Department of Energy, Mines and Petroleum Resources. You'd think a rock was just a rock, but amazingly enough, they have a life cycle of their own, going from rock to sand and back to rock. In the bottom of the Great Slave Lake, for example, there are layers of sand that has been beaten off the rocks along the shoreline. The sand builds in layers, much like the pages of a book. Bottom layers are continually pressurized by the constant layering and eventually turn back into rock. Often, small animals, fish, or crustaceans get trapped in the layers, and they also turn into rock. These become fossils.
The age of these things is about...
With our hammers in hand, we set off hoping to find a few fossils of our own. Todd explained that the rock we were standing on was about 2.6 billion years old. That's one old rock. This rock had been scraped clean by a huge glacier as it receded. We also found a hollow section in one of the rocks that had been left there by underground water. Water which has seeped in freezes in the winter, expanding as it does and causing pieces of the rock to break free. These pieces will be pounded by the waves and eventually turned into sand to fill the bottom of the lake and start the rock cycle all over again. Needless to say, we helped the cycle on a bit ourselves. Todd said the hammers were obviously a big hit. When we returned to the camp, Ma was in the process of showing some of us how to make baskets and canoes out of birch bark. The bark had been taken off smooth birch trees in the spring and saved until now. She also had a good supply of caribou sinew to sew the sides and ends of our projects. Sinew is the perfect thread as it binds to itself and creates the strongest of bonds. A few people made baskets capable of carrying water or food, and others made canoes. Our canoes weren't large enough to sit in, but they worked. Our camping trips weren't just spent learning, though. We had some special time for other things.
place to stop and think a while. Go fishing in the morning, whatever suits your style. The bay has all the best things to keep me occupied. I'll find a secret hiding spot to lose my friends outside. Well, the summer breeze is blowing, the flowers here to stay. I'll tell you where I'm going, out camping by the bay. Well, you can pluck a duck in the morning, you can pluck 'em in the day. You can pluck a duck in the evening, but the down gets in the way. Well, the summer breeze is blowing, the flowers here to stay. I'll tell you where I'm going, out camping by the bay. Well, the summer breeze is blowing, the flowers here to stay. I'll tell you where I'm going, out camping by the bay.
Later that summer, a second cross-cultural science camp was held in the eastern Arctic. We spent a week on Baffin Island, near the village of Pagnertung. Again, there were lots of students, elder teachers, and scientists. But because it was in the eastern Arctic, we had Inuit elders to lead us. Our campsite was excellent, with lots of opportunity for environmental discovery on the land, and from Cumberland Sound, a huge saltwater bay off the Davis Strait. The director of our camp, David Lloyd, set aside the first day for us to get to know each other. We played a couple of different trust games that made us all feel more comfortable. This is the pyramid game. The ones on the bottom aren't too comfortable. We tried a circle game where each of us had to lean on the one behind. We were supposed to use teamwork. I guess we needed to get to know each other better. It didn't take long for that to happen when David demonstrated one more trust game.
Put your hands at your side and fall backwards. But you trust me, right? If you trust me, nothing's gonna happen to you.
But if you're over there, how can I trust you to catch me?
I promise nothing's gonna happen to you. Just trust me.
Needless to say, that loosened everybody up. A rare treat for us was a thunderstorm. Many people at the camp had never experienced a thunderstorm before, so this was great. We were in the process of learning how to skin a seal when it began. David took this as a great opportunity to tell us about the weather.
Yeah, it's very rare to have electrical storms in the Arctic because it's not very often we get such hot air masses develop. And I've been told in the past that it's about a once in every 10 or 15 years occurrence. For most of the students, it was the very first time they ever saw lightning and thunder. And for a good many of the elders as well, they had not experienced it very often. And consequently, it was a perfect opportunity for us to do some weather science.
Although there was a lot of thunder and lightning well into the night, there was no rain, and we were able to continue with the seal skinning without getting drenched. With help, we each tried our hand at skinning a seal. An incision is made down the length of the stomach from the tail to the chin, and the blubber and skin is cut away. With the fur and blubber cut aside, the ribs are opened, and the intestines, heart, liver, and kidneys are removed. David began showing us the insides of the seal, so we would know just how they function.
Probably is the pancreas that lies on top of
The liver looks quite like a human's and serves the same purpose, cleaning poisons out of the blood. The stomach was next, and some of us wanted to see what the seal had been eating.
What do seals eat?
It turned out to be krill, a shrimp-shaped invertebrate.
Now you see that it's partially digested. Yeah.
After the krill leaves the stomach, it travels down to the intestines where nourishment is derived and sent to the rest of the body. A meal can take 10 to 15 hours to travel the length of the intestine. No wonder. Look how long it is.
Pretty long, eh?
26 feet.
Yeah.
Human.
Like the same as the humans, it's 26 feet.
Yeah.
That's a lot of intestine inside a little seal. One day, we were treated to a special surprise. We were shown 75-year-old whaling boats, and we were going to get a chance to row them. Amy Papazzi put 10 of us in the boat and gave us lessons on rowing in rhythm. It's a lot harder than it looks. Our efforts almost put the boat into the reef, a very dangerous spot. Thank goodness we had someone with the knowledge and strength to turn us around. Our skill improved, though, and it would have been great if we'd had just a little more time to practice. A year, maybe?
Almost there! Another 6 miles! Let's go! Okay, stop!
I'd like to say it was a lot easier trying to get the boat out of the water, but at 1,690 pounds, it took everything we had. A slip was in place to make it easier, and we finally succeeded. Little did we know, this lesson was to demonstrate a small bit of the effort put out by the Inuit when they were whaling a long time ago. Keckerton, an historic national park on Cumberland Sound, was an old bowhead whaling station many years ago, and it lay just a short boat trip away. This is a very historic area, as the Inuit joined with the Scottish and the Americans to hunt whales. Itungat Aksayuk and Palusi Ankmarlik, 2 Inuit elders, told us about their life with the whalers. During that time, the Inuit lived in a home called a kumak. A kumak consisted of a foundation of stones with a frame of whalebone or baleen tied together with sealskin. The roof was often made of wood or sod. Many kumak foundations still exist, but the whalebones are mostly gone. Scottish and American whalers had wooden bunkhouses on 2 different sites on the island. After the whalers left Keckerton, the wooden buildings became sleds or homes. North of the tree line, wood is scarce, and it quickly became a precious commodity. Whaling started around the beginning of June and continued on until the freeze. Itungat showed us the weapons they used to catch a whale.
This is a handheld harpoon. This is the next one that they would use. This is called the lance. This was used to try and kill the whale.
The men would row for days on end to get the whale back to the site for cutting. There would be no sleep while they traveled, and they would even eat while rowing. We were having a hard time just rowing in a circle, and the whalers in the old days did it for days. Even after they had rowed that huge whale back to the camp, the meat, blubber, and baleen would have to be cut up before they could go to sleep. Life was a lot harder in those days. Whales were cut up right on the rocks and carried piece by piece to the camp. The Inuit believed the rocks were stained because of the thousands of whales slaughtered there. After the whale was cut up, the blubber was packed into barrels to be shipped to Scotland or the USA. The meat of the whale was given to the Inuit working there. Whale bones provided frames for their kumaks and sleds. Whale bones were also cut up and boiled in settling vats. After boiling, the residue would be packed into barrels, shipped across the ocean, and later used as a type of plastic or sealer. A barrel maker worked on site to provide the millions of barrels needed to transport the cargo. It was estimated that one whale could yield 150 barrels of oil, and in the span of 30 years, 18,000 whales were caught. That's the equivalent to heating a community of 300 people for 1,000 years. A favorite session at this camp was the instruction given by David on lemmings, a very familiar rodent in the Arctic. One group stayed to dissect the lemming, while another group gathered blood samples to examine under a microscope. David showed us the lemming's very sharp teeth that grow continuously all its life. A lemming will chew everything. If it didn't, its teeth would grow up through the top of its mouth. Lemmings are mammals just like us. They have hair, are warm-blooded, and have mammary glands. With 2 dissecting kits, we set to work. Since the lemmings are so small, we had to be careful not to cut too deep and risk disturbing the organs inside.
And mammal is the shrew.
We saw all the organs normally found in a human's body, but in miniature. A small heart, kidneys, intestines, stomach, lungs, and liver. While we were dissecting, some students had been busy with Donna Waters, a conservation education officer with the Department of Renewable Resources. They had gathered different sea life from the water and set them up in a tent for everyone to see. Species included snails, peanut worms, shells, and colander seaweed. I wonder why they call it that.
Because it looks like those bowls you put spaghetti in to drain out all.
Before I knew it, the camps were over, and it was time to get on with the regular routine. Just looking at the footage again has brought back some very special memories for me, like the time in Rae-Edzo when we were asked to find our own spirit spots. These little private places gave all of us time to think and reflect on the camps and on our lives. Some of us picked spots near the water, and some picked them amongst the trees. We wrote in our journals, or just colored. Another really special event was the circle fire we held at the Rae-Edzo camp. This was one of the times the talking stick was passed around so everyone could tell about their day.
My name is Misty. I had a wonderful day. I had fun with Brenda and Rosette and with the elders.
One event that I think touched all of us was the circle dance with the Rae-Edzo Dene youth drummers. This circle dance holds a very special meaning. After a drum ceremony, a circle dance is held involving everyone to bind them together spiritually. We got into the feeling of the moment and couldn't help but join in. It was contagious. And just like Johnny said, it sure makes you feel good. Well, I hope you enjoyed my home movie, although you'd never know I was even there. Next time, I'll let someone else run the camera. Hope to see you next year.